She wasn't supposed to be in that room. She wasn't supposed to open that drawer. And she definitely wasn't supposed to read what was written inside. But she did, and the moment she turned that last page, the moment her eyes landed on the name she'd spent 7 years searching for, the door clicked shut behind her. He'd been watching the whole time. Stay right here, because what happens in the next few minutes will change everything you think you know about loyalty, blood, and the price of knowing too much. Drop a comment right now, just the word LEDGER, and when this story ends, you'll understand exactly why. The Morvetti estate sat at the edge of the city, like something the rest of the world had agreed to forget about. 3 stories of cold stone, iron gates, security cameras blinking red at every corner. The neighbors on either side had sold their houses 3 years ago and never said why. People in this part of town had learned a long time ago that asking questions about the Morvetti family was a fast way to stop being the kind of person who asked questions at all. Nadia Osei knew this. She'd grown up 2 neighborhoods over, in the kind of house where the pipes knocked in winter and the radiator was more suggestion than heat. She knew the Morvetti name the same way everyone from that side of the city knew it, as a warning. As a name you said quietly, if you said it at all. But Nadia was 26 years old. Her mother was behind on rent. Her younger brother's tuition bill had just come due, and the cleaning agency had offered her double rates for the Morvetti estate assignment. So she said yes. She told herself it would be simple. Clean the rooms you're told to clean. Don't touch anything that doesn't need touching. Don't look anyone in the eye. Take the money and go home. She was very good at telling herself things. The first week passed without incident. The estate was largely empty during her shifts, early mornings, 6 to noon, while most of the household slept or conducted whatever business happened behind closed doors. She was told never to open. A housekeeper named Mrs. Ferrero met her at the gate each morning, handed her a list of approved rooms, and disappeared into the east wing without another word. The list was always the same. Kitchen, 3 bathrooms, the long corridor on the 2nd floor, the sitting room with the white furniture nobody ever seemed to sit in. Never the study, never the basement, never the room at the end of the east hallway with the iron handle instead of a knob. Nadia cleaned what she was told to clean and went home. But the estate was big, and the silence was heavy, and Nadia was someone who noticed things. She noticed that fresh flowers appeared on the mantel every Tuesday, but no one ever seemed to bring them. She noticed that the ash in the fireplace was always cold, but always fresh. She noticed that the large oil portrait hanging at the top of the staircase, a man in his 40s, dark-eyed, jaw set like it had been carved rather than born, watched every room from every angle, depending on where you stood. She noticed that someone had scratched 3 letters into the back of the corridor baseboard, low to the ground where no one would think to look. 3 letters in desperate, uneven strokes. Run. She told herself it was old. She told herself it meant nothing. She told herself a lot of things that second week. His name was Sal Morvetti. Not the patriarch, that was the old man in the portrait, long dead, they said, though nobody said how. Sal was the underboss, 34 years old. The one who ran things now while the upper ranks kept their hands clean and their faces out of newspapers. Nadia had never seen him in person. She'd heard him once, a low voice on the other side of a closed door, even and unhurried, the way men speak when they're used to not repeating themselves. She'd heard the door to whatever room he was in go very quiet immediately after, the way a room goes quiet when something has just been decided. She did not want to meet him. And then on a Thursday morning in her 3rd week, she went to the approved sitting room and found that Mrs. Ferrero had left a note on the cleaning cart. East corridor, 2nd door on the right, full clean, leave the desk. A new room. The note was written in Mrs. Ferrero's stiff, careful handwriting, nothing unusual about it. Probably just an expansion of her duties. Probably just an extra room they decided needed attention. Nadia wheeled the cart to the east corridor and pushed open the 2nd door on the right. It was an office. Small compared to the rest of the estate, intimate, almost. Dark wood shelves lining every wall, floor to ceiling, packed with ledgers and folders and binders with no labels on their spines. A single desk lamp, a window with the curtains drawn 3/4 of the way. And the desk. "Leave the desk," the note had said. Nadia cleaned the shelves. She dusted the lamp. She worked her way around the room the way she always did, methodically, without touching what she wasn't supposed to touch. She was almost done when she noticed the drawer. It was slightly open. Not all the way, barely a centimeter, just enough to see a corner of dark leather, like a book or a journal. Just enough to see that something was sticking out of it, a loose page, curling slightly at the edge the way paper curls when it's been handled too many times. She should have left it. She stood there for a long moment, cleaning cloth in her hand, listening to the silence of the house around her. Then she pulled open the drawer. The ledger was old. Not antique, not the romantic kind of old, just worn, used. The leather cover was cracked at the spine, the pages soft from years of fingers turning them. Someone had written on the inside cover in black ink, small and precise, names, debts, resolutions. Nadia knew she shouldn't open it. She opened it. The first pages were dense, columns of figures, dates, initials. She didn't understand most of it. Money, maybe, quantities of something, transactions that didn't name their nature. But then the format changed. Partway through, the columns disappeared and what replaced them was something simpler and far more terrible. Names, full names, dates beside them, and in the final column, one of 2 words. Settled or removed. There were 43 names. 43 names, and 31 of them had the word removed written beside them in that same small, precise handwriting. Nadia's hands were very still. The kind of still that happens when your body understands something before your mind will let itself. She turned the pages slowly. The names meant nothing to her, most of them. People from other cities, other operations, names that only mattered inside a world she'd chosen to stay outside of. And then, near the back, her eye caught a name that made her breath stop completely. Kwame Osei, removed, October 14th. 7 years ago. Her father's name. October 14th was the night her father had gone out for cigarettes and never come home. The night the police had told them there was no evidence of anything. The night they'd been handed a case number and a detective's card, and a silence so complete it had hollowed out the center of her family and never filled back in. Nadia's father had not run away. He had not started a new life somewhere. He had not abandoned them. He had worked for these people, and they had removed him. The page shook in her hands. She hadn't realized she was holding it. She'd pulled it halfway out without thinking, and now her fingers were trembling and she couldn't make them stop. She didn't hear the door. She didn't hear the footsteps. She didn't hear anything until the voice came from directly behind her, low, unhurried, that same voice she'd heard once through a closed door. "You should put that down." Nadia turned. He was taller than she'd expected. Not imposing the way large men are imposing, there was nothing loud about him. He was lean, dark-suited, standing with his hands loose at his sides and his expression completely, unsettlingly calm. His eyes moved from her face to the ledger in her hands, to the page she'd half pulled free. Something in those eyes changed. Not anger, she'd expected anger. Something colder than anger. Something that looked like a decision being made. "Set it down on the desk," he said, carefully. Her body moved before her mind could argue. She set the ledger down. Her hands were still shaking. "Turn around." She turned. He was already at the door. Not to leave, he pulled it shut, and she heard the sound of a lock turning. A real lock, old hardware, heavy. "You read it," he said. It wasn't a question. Her voice came out wrong. She steadied it. "I was cleaning, the drawer was open, I didn't." "You read it." Still not a question. He walked to the desk, not quickly, and stood on the other side of it looking at the ledger. Then he looked at her. "Which name?" The question stopped her completely. "Which name made you stop?" he said, quieter now. "Because you weren't shaking at the columns. You were shaking at the back. Which name?" Nadia said nothing. "I'll find it," he said simply. "It would be better if you told me." "Osei," she said. The word came out like something physical. "Kwame Osei." The silence that followed was the longest of her life. Sal Morvetti looked at her for a very long time. His face gave away nothing, but he didn't look away, and he didn't move, and something in the quality of the silence shifted slightly. Not softer, not harder, just different. "How long have you been working here?" he said. 3 weeks. Before that, I wasn't looking for anything. I needed the money. Mrs. Ferrero hired me through the agency, and she stopped. She made herself breathe. I didn't know. And now you do. She didn't answer. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her, looking at the strip of light between the curtain edges. She could see his reflection faintly in the dark glass, that same unreadable expression. "You understand what happens now," he said. She did. She understood it clearly and completely, the way you understand things when the body is afraid and the mind has gone very simple and precise. "You can't let me leave," she said. "No," he said, "I can't." They gave her a room on the 2nd floor. Not a cell, nothing so dramatic. A room with a bed and a window and a lock on the outside of the door. Clean, sparse, a bathroom attached, a small table, no phone. Mrs. Ferrero brought her meals without looking at her and left without speaking. The first night, Nadia sat on the edge of the bed and could not stop her mind from going back. Not to the ledger, not to Sal Morvetti's eyes, back further than that. Back to the last morning, her father was alive. She remembered the smell of his coat. That specific smell, old wool and motor oil and something else underneath. Something she'd never been able to name. Something that was just him. He hung that coat on the hook by the door every single night for as long as she could remember. Brown corduroy, worn at both elbows. He'd bought it secondhand and worn it for 11 years and always said it had more life left in it. After he disappeared, her mother had kept the coat on the hook for 3 months. Couldn't bring herself to move it. Nadia used to stop in front of it on the way to school sometimes, not to smell it, not on purpose, but it was unavoidable. The scent would hit her before she reached the door, and she'd have to stand very still for a few seconds and breathe through her mouth until it passed. She remembered the missing person flyer. Her mother had made it at the library on a Tuesday, 2 weeks after he'd gone. She used a photograph from Nadia's cousin's birthday party, her father laughing at something off camera, one hand raised mid-gesture. He looked like himself in it. That was the hardest part. He looked so completely like himself. Missing, Kwame Osei, 44 years old. Last seen October 14th in the Garfield Park area. They'd taped them to telephone poles for 6 blocks in every direction. Nadia had done 3 poles herself, standing on her tiptoes in the cold, pressing the paper flat and smoothing out the corners so the wind wouldn't take the edges. Within 2 weeks, most of them had been rained off. She remembered the detective. His name was Purcell. He had a voice like old concrete, flat, without texture, the kind of voice that has learned to deliver bad news so many times it has forgotten that bad news is different from regular news. He'd called her mother on a Tuesday in December, 2 months after her father vanished, and Nadia had sat at the kitchen table listening to her mother's half of the conversation, watching her mother's face do something she'd never seen it do before. Go completely still, the way a face goes still when it's decided to stop hopping. "Yes, I understand. Yes, thank you for letting us know." She hung up and sat down at the table and folded her hands and said, very quietly, "They're closing it. Not enough to go on," they said. Not enough. Nadia had been 19 years old. She'd taken the detective's card from her mother's hand. She'd called that number every 2 weeks for the next 4 months until the number rang without answer, and then she'd stopped, because you can only do so much with silence before it starts to damage you permanently. She had kept the card. She still had it, in the bottom of the same notebook where she tracked every expense to the cent, worn at the corners. The ink faded to a pale gray. Detective R. Purcell, case 2017-4481. And now, sitting on the edge of this bed, in this room that was not a cell but might as well be, She understood with complete and shattering clarity that case 2017-4481 had never been a missing person case. It had been a cover. Her father had been removed. Written down in a leather ledger like a debt resolved. A line item, one of 31. The rage came back, that clean, cold, useless rage, and this time she didn't press it down. She let it move through her, fully, every corner. And then, when it had passed, what was left underneath it was something different. Something sharper, quieter, more patient. She didn't sleep that night, not because she was afraid. Because she was thinking. On the second day, Sal came to the room. He stood in the doorway, didn't enter, didn't sit. He looked at her with that same calculating stillness and said, "Ask your question." She had many questions. She chose the one that mattered most. "Did you give the order?" He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "But you know who did." "Yes." "And the person who did it is no longer a concern." He said it flatly, without drama. "Your father was not supposed to be touched. He was a logistics contact, peripheral. The man who ordered it overstepped his authority and was dealt with internally." Nadia stared at him. "Dealt with internally," she repeated. "Yes. You're telling me the man who killed my father is dead. I'm telling you the ledger reflects what happened. I'm not asking you to feel anything about it." The rage was still there, but it was behind glass now, controlled, useful. She pressed it down. Rage was not going to get her out of this room. "What happens to me?" she said. "That depends." "On what?" He looked at her steadily. "On whether I can trust that what you've read stays contained. Whether I have reason to believe you won't walk out of here and hand that information to every person who would use it against this family." "You can't know that," she said. "There's no way for you to know that." "No," he agreed. "There is." He left. The lock turned behind him. Days passed. She was not mistreated. She was fed. The window looked out over the estate's back garden, which was beautiful in a severe, geometric way, hedges trimmed to perfect squares, gravel paths raked clean. She watched the groundskeeper work in the mornings and thought about the 3 letters scratched into the baseboard. "Run." On the 5th day, she asked Mrs. Ferraro, not looking at her, just speaking to the air as the woman set down the dinner tray. "The woman who cleaned before me. What was her name?" Mrs. Ferraro didn't answer. She set the tray down and left. On the 6th day, Sal came again. He sat this time in the chair by the table, which he turned to face her where she stood near the window. "You're not afraid," he said. It came out like an observation he wasn't sure what to do with. "I'm afraid," she said. "I'm not showing it to you." Something in his face shifted, not quite a reaction, something that happened just behind his eyes. "Ask me something else," he said. She thought about it, then. The ledger, the 31 names marked removed. Did they all deserve it? He was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said, "not all of them." She hadn't expected him to say that. She looked at him directly for the first time. He met her eyes without flinching. "Then how do you carry it?" she said. He didn't answer right away. He looked at the window. When he spoke, his voice was the same, level, quiet, but something underneath it was different. "Badly," he said. "You carry it badly and you don't let anyone see." She started planning on day 8. Not recklessly, she was not a reckless person. She was a person who cleaned 30 rooms a week and took 3 buses to get to each job and kept a notebook where she tracked every expense to the cent. She planned things carefully. She had been planning things carefully her whole life just to stand still. She started noticing patterns. The guard who brought her breakfast was different from the one who checked the lock at night. The shift change happened at 7 a.m., and 9 p.m. Mrs. Ferraro walked the ground floor corridor at 8:30 every morning with a set of keys on a ring that jangled when she walked. The window in the bathroom had been painted shut, but the paint was old and thin. She waited, she memorized, she said nothing. On the 11th day, Sal came to the room and told her he was considering releasing her. She kept her face neutral. Considering, she said. There are people in this organization, he said carefully, who would not agree with that decision, who would see it as a liability that couldn't be managed. And what do you see it as? He looked at her for a long moment. A mistake I made by keeping you, he said. You came here for money. You didn't come looking for this. The situation you're in isn't something you chose. My father didn't choose it either, she said quietly. A silence. No, he said, he didn't. She studied him, this man in his dark suits with his level voice and his cold eyes that were, she'd started to notice, not entirely cold. Not when he looked at her. Not when he spoke about things that had been done wrong. She thought about the ledger, about 31 names. She thought about the 3 letters in the baseboard. If you release me, she said slowly, what guarantees do I have that I'm actually free, that I'm not followed, that 6 months from now someone doesn't decide I'm still a liability? None, he said. I can't give you guarantees, I can give you my word. Your word, she repeated. I understand if that's not enough. It was. She knew it was. She also knew that this man, this careful, damaged, self-contained man sitting across from her, was probably the closest thing to honest she was going to get in this house. But she also knew that his word and his people were 2 different things, and his people had written 31 names in a ledger. She nodded slowly, said she would think about it. He left. She waited 2 hours. Then she moved. Bathroom, the window, 4 days of planning compressed into 30 seconds of action, fingers working the frame, pressing at the corners, testing the give in the old paint. First try, nothing. Second try, a crack like a knuckle popping. Third try. It gave. A sound like a sharp intake of breath, paint splitting along the frame edge. The window swung inward and cold air hit her face, 5:30 in the morning, that particular pre-dawn gray that makes everything look like a photograph of itself. She looked down. The drop was further than she'd hoped. She dropped anyway. The garden, the perfect geometric garden with its raked gravel and its trimmed hedges. She hit the gravel path and it was loud, too loud, every step a crunch that felt like a shout in the pre-dawn silence. She moved off it, onto the grass, faster now. Don't look back, don't look at the house, don't look at the cameras. The east wall, the gardener's gate, 30 yards, 20. She could see it, the iron latch, never padlocked, she'd counted on that. She'd staked everything on that one observation from an upstairs window 11 days ago. 10 yards. 5. Her hand hit the latch, cold iron. She threw it up and the gate swung wide and she was through, and the alley beyond was dark and wet and the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She ran. Not a jog, not a careful pace. She ran, full sprint, arms pumping, shoes slapping wet pavement, lungs already burning because her body had been sedentary for 11 days and it was angry about being asked to perform like this. Her thighs screamed. Her breath came in ragged pulls. The alley opened onto a street, streetlights, a dumpster, a parked van. She kept running. No alarm. Not yet. 6 blocks. She ran 6 full blocks before her body stopped cooperating, before her legs went from running to stumbling to a hard stop against a chain-link fence, both hands gripping the metal, head down, chest heaving. 47 seconds between the gate and this fence. She knew because she'd counted. She straightened up. No phone, no money. Everything she'd arrived with was still in that room upstairs. 5:40 in the morning. The city around her was just barely starting to breathe. A distant bus. A light going on in an apartment 3 floors up. The smell of someone's early coffee drifting from somewhere. She was standing in the open with nothing but the clothes on her back and the knowledge of 31 names, and one of them her father's. She thought very clearly, get to people, get to noise, get to cameras. She started walking. She didn't make it 2 more blocks. The car was black, no plates she could see. It didn't accelerate to catch her or brake to cut her off. It simply appeared at her pace, rolling alongside her the way something patient rolls alongside something that is going to stop eventually. The window came down. Sal Morvetti looked at her from the passenger seat. Not angry, that was the thing that frightened her most. He looked exactly the way he always looked. Level, still, like the outcome of this moment had been factored into a calculation he'd already completed. "Get in," he said. She didn't move. "The people I mentioned," he said, "the ones who would not agree with releasing you, they know you're gone, they have people 2 streets over." He paused. "Get in." She looked at him. She looked at the street. She thought about 31 names. She got in. The car moved. The city slid past the windows, streetlights, storefronts, the gray dissolving morning. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. "You let me get out," she said finally. "Yes." She waited for more. He didn't offer it. "Why?" she said. He was quiet. Not the quiet of a man thinking of an answer. The quiet of a man deciding how much of the true answer to give. "Because I needed to know what you'd do," he said at last, "and because some part of me wanted you to make it." She looked at him. "Some part," she said. "The part that doesn't run this organization." She held that, turned it over, looked at it from every angle. He had opened the window, deliberately. He had told her about the people who wanted her gone, which meant he'd also told those same people she was leaving, which meant he'd set a clock running the moment she hit the alley. He'd known exactly how far she'd get. He'd been in the car before she even reached the gate. She didn't know if that made him the only person in this city keeping her alive, or simply the most patient kind of dangerous. She wasn't sure there was a difference. "Where are we going?" she said. "Somewhere safe," he said. The word safe landed in the car and sat there, neither of them touching it. "While I figure out how to make this work without anyone on my side deciding to simplify the problem. And if you can't figure that out." He looked at her. His eyes were level, clear, completely unreadable. "Then you'll be the first person I tell." She didn't answer. The city moved. Somewhere behind them, the Morvetti estate sat at the edge of everything, cameras blinking red, the ledger still in its drawer, with her father's name still on its page. And Nadia Osei, who had gone into clean rooms and come out knowing too much, sat in this black car next to the man who had locked her in and then handed her the key, and she understood one thing completely. She was not free. She was not safe. She was something in between, in the hands of a man who might be keeping her alive because he was the only one with a reason to, or because she was more useful breathing than not, and the line between those two things in his world was thinner than a page in a ledger. She did not know which it was. She was not sure he did either. And somewhere in the part of her, that was her father's daughter, the part that had kept a case number and a detective's card for 7 years and never stopped looking. She understood that not knowing was not the same as giving up. She was still thinking. She was still counting. She was not done yet. You already know what she found in that ledger. What you don't know yet is what she's going to do with it. Because a woman who survives 11 days inside a mafia estate drops out of a bathroom window and still gets back in that car. That's not a woman who's given up. That's a woman who's changed her plan. If you want to find out what Nadia does with her father's name, with 31 names, with everything she now knows, subscribe and hit the notification bell right now. And drop a comment below with one word. Should Nadia trust him or use him? Because the next chapter depends on which kind of woman she decides to be.